right. So I got the go ahead and we are good to go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of Sitka Whalefest 2020. This year is a virtual marine festival. Of course, we wish we could all be together in Sitka this year, but we're really excited that we're able to bring Sitka Whalefest to you during this really hard time. My name is Madison Cosma, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. So thank you for being here with me. Sitka Whalefest has a really special place in my heart, actually. It is what brought me to Alaska in the first place. In 2012, I was a undergraduate student at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. And I was doing what most undergraduate students do when they're graduating. I was panicking a bit, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I was spending a lot of time online trying to figure out what my next life step was going to be. And I was lucky enough to stumble across a AmeriCorps volunteer position with Sitka Whalefest and the Sitka Sound Science Center. And so I started off, so I packed up my bags and I went to Alaska, and it was one of the best decisions of my life. And so I started off with Whalefest as a volunteer. I have been the director, I've been an attendee, a moderator, a speaker, and I've even been a bartender at the banquet. So I've worn a lot of hats with Whalefest, and this year I'm really excited and honored to be a part of the Science Symposium Committee. Now, all this wouldn't be possible without you, our wonderful attendees. I'm so excited. I see all the messages in the chat and friends and people that I haven't seen in a while, and new people as well. So thank you all for coming here. And it also wouldn't happen without our generous supports from our sponsors. And so you can see from the slide all of our wonderful sponsors. So thank you to the National Science Foundation, the North Pacific Research Board, Sitka Visit, and Sitka Salmon Share, as well as thank you to the University of Alaska Southeast and University of Alaska Fairbanks for being our partner in the Science Symposium and the student programs. So before I dive into the speakers for today, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our wonderful Alex Thorne, who is our Sitka Whalefest director.
Hi, everybody. As Madison said, I'm Alex Thorne, and I'm the Whalefest director for Sitka Sound Science Center. It is my pleasure to welcome you back to the second day of our first ever virtual Sitka Whalefest. Although this festival looks a little different this year, it's still the same goals that we have. We gather virtually to celebrate marine life through science, storytelling, and community. And we hope that through the events that we've planned for you, we give you a little bit of both, even through some things like this, my background. It's Mount Edgecombe, probably one of the most iconic sites in Sitka. You can see it from just about anywhere. Before we get the day started, I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you who are joining us, both our friends and longtime participants that I've seen. I have seen you all as you signed up, and it really warms my heart to see you. And to the new people who have not been a part of Whalefest before, thank you for joining us this year. When we decided to go virtual, we saw a real opportunity to lift some access barriers that maybe in the past we weren't able to. Travel to Sitka, although it is beautiful and well worth the trip, it can be a barrier in and of itself. It's expensive. So our goal this year was to make sure that as many people as possible could access the festival. And one way we felt we could do that for the community abroad and outside of Sitka, as well as our Sitka community, was to be able to offer registration by donation, and donate if you can. And we're really thankful to our sponsors and supporters for their contributions that have allowed us to produce this festival and offer registration this way. So thank you. And thank you to all of you. Without you, this festival doesn't happen, and your support and contributions helps our organization, the Sitka Sound Science Center, continue their work and mission of science education and research. So without further ado, we have a lot to get to today. I will turn you back over to the very capable hands of Madison Cosma, and I hope you enjoy yourselves. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Alex. And yeah, Mount Edgecombe looks pretty epic in that background of yours. So thanks for sharing that with us, for those of us who can't be in Sitka this year. So as you all know, Our theme this year is Ocean Connections, Culture and Communication. Yesterday, we heard from two incredible speakers. Hal Whitehead discussed the cultural lives of sperm whales, and Heidi Harley really helped us understand how dolphins think. So together, we learned how important culture and communication are for the lives of these marine creatures. And if you missed these amazing presentations, don't worry. They have been recorded and will be available at a later date. There's more information about that to come. So before I jump into the speakers for today, of course, we've got some housekeeping items to chat about. So first, you can see from our agenda today, again, we have two speakers that we're going to hear from, and you'll have the opportunity to ask questions following each of those talks. We're really trying to make our presentations as engaging as possible since we're not in person this year. So if there's polls or questions, please feel free if you want to participate. If you don't, that's totally fine. Just watch and go around for the ride. So number two is we have some support staff here with us today that are ensuring that our tech runs smoothly and answering any questions. So if you have any questions, please use that chat bar on the right side of your screen to ask us whatever you need. And three, we have a video for you to kind of show you how to use Zoom in case it's a new program for you, or if you just need a refresher. So turn your attention to that video.
As an attendee, these controls are available at the bottom of the Zoom window. Mute and unmute mutes your microphone or unmutes it. Start or stop video turns your webcam on or off. Participants opens a list of users in the meeting. In this window, you can rename yourself by hovering over your name, clicking More, and choosing Rename. You also have the ability to raise your hand and ask a question during a conference or meeting. Chat lets you message everybody in the meeting or just a specific person. For questions about the event, message Event Support. Reactions. Use this menu to raise your hand or give a thumbs up, among many other options. The Leave button allows you to leave the meeting. Breakout rooms are discussion groups separate from the main conference. Within the breakout room, you will be able to use voice and chat. When the session is done, you will be brought back to the conference. Poll questions may appear on your screen during the conference. Once you've answered the poll question, you may dismiss it. During the conference, you may be asked to participate in a whiteboard session. To be able to draw on the presenter's whiteboard, click View Options at the very top and click Annotate. At the top of the screen, you'll see various tools that allow you to draw, erase, and annotate the whiteboard.
All right, again, if you have any questions, even after that video, please put it in the chat. We're here to help you. We want your experience to be wonderful. Sorry, let's see. So today we're going to hear from two amazing speakers. First, we're going to get a really unique look at Indigenous communities during a time when the climate is rapidly changing. And last, we're going to learn about killer whale culture and why females are so important. So for our first speaker today, we have Maya Lukin, who will be talking about changing weather, changing traditions, and Indigenous people in Alaska. Maya is a Nupiaq and was born in Kotzebue, Alaska, raised on the shores of Cape Krusenstern National Monument. Currently, she is the superintendent at the National Park Service Western Arctic National Parklands. The parks include over 9.2 million acres in Northwest Alaska, and she's responsible for protecting and preserving the natural and cultural resources within the parks, as well as community relationship building, subsistence management, and preparing for changes in the Arctic climate. Even with her standing and full-time job, Maya does everything she can to practice a subsistence and traditional calendar in her life. For example, during salmon season, she gets up really early in the day so she can knock out 4 hours of work. Then she's filleting, washing salmon during her lunch hour, work again, and as soon as she's done, she's brining, drying, and smoking salmon until late hours of the night. Then she gets up the next day and does it again. So much of her food and what sustains her and her family comes from the ocean. Her and her family process all of their protein themselves. They have 5 freezers for fish, marine mammals, waterfowls, as well as resources from the land like berries, greens, and caribou and moose. She says she's a saltwater girl at heart, and no matter what happens in her life, her connection is always saltwater waves and frozen ice of the ocean. So we have a ton of young people in the audience during whalefest. We have students and we have fourth graders all the way to high school and graduate students. So I asked Maya if she had any advice for the youth out there. And she had some pretty wise words. She said, appreciate what you have, your culture, your family, your traditions. And always remember it's okay to fail. I have failed countless times, but instead of dwelling on why I failed, I try to figure out what I can change to succeed. Remember the lessons you learned so you don't make the mistake again. And last, remember to teach and learn every single day. Pass on what you know and try to learn as much as you can. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Maya.
Uvwalotok, everybody. My name is Maya Kataklukin. I'm going to introduce myself in the traditional way during the presentation. So we can just go ahead and start that. I'm actually in rural Alaska, and the internet here is not, it's kind of spotty. And so whenever I do my presentations, I usually turn off my video and then I'll turn it right back on to answer questions afterwards. So this presentation is the changing weather and changing traditions. You can go ahead to the next slide. So uvlalotak, uvanga katak kikikdarog mirunga, lusisoli rorunga, apangalu akanga, Willie and Jenny Johnson of Kotzebue, uvanga inyupe lusuami. And what I said was good morning. My name is Maya Kataklukin. I am from Kotzebue and Sisolik. My parents are Willie and Jenny Johnson of Kotzebue, and I'm Inupiat and I'm Finnish Sami. It's important in my culture to introduce where I come from, where I was raised, and who my parents are as a sign of respect to the land and the people and the cultures who raised me. Sisolik, where I'm from, translates to a place where beluga go. And I'm the superintendent for the National Park Service at Western Arctic National Parklands, headquartered in Kotzebue. So I want to ensure that everyone is comfortable with the presentation. So I will warn you of possible triggers. There are photos of animals that have been taken for subsistence purposes, like these beluga here. Like I said, Sisolik is named Sisolik because it's where belugas are, and it's one of the resources that we had growing up. 1977, that's pre-Anilka Maya on the beaches of Cape Krusenstern. And then in 1981, when Anilka was passed, the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, there I was again on the shores of Cape Krusenstern. And then in 2009, which was the last time that we actually caught beluga in Cape Krusenstern because of the changing migration of beluga whales. Next slide, please. So Kotzebue, Kikikdavaruk, it's called almost an island in Inupiaq. It's located on a gravel spit in the Baldwin Peninsula. It extends into the Kotzebue Sound near the mouths of three rivers. Kotzebue is north of the Arctic Circle, and it's truly a gateway to the Arctic. It serves as the headquarters for the 3 parks I manage, encompassing 9 million acres of federal public land. Those parks include Cape Krusenstern National Monument, the Noatak National Preserve, and Kobuk Valley National Park. Kotzebue and its surrounding communities have an indigenous population rich in history and culture. Next slide, please. So the location of the communities in Northwest Alaska, they were specifically established there by indigenous people because they were a prime location for subsistence hunting and fishing, as well as safe winter and summer transportation. A connection to our past allows for the perpetuation of our culture for future generations, and the strategic locations that Inupiat people settled in during winter and summer months allowed for just that. And typically speaking, we had different summer and winter homes, so we were nomadic people up here. The oldest archaeological site with caribou hunting remains was found actually 2 summers ago in the Noatak National Preserve, and dated to approximately 13,800 years ago. So there we have scientific evidence that for at least the past 14,000 years, we've sustained a healthy caribou population. So of the 7,500 people in the communities surrounding our 3 parks, 82% of the residents are Inupiat with families who've lived in the area for at least 600 years, including mine. Next slide, please. So you heard, excuse me, you heard me say ANILCA earlier. All three of the parks we manage were established under ANILCA, the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, signed into law by President Jimmy Carter on December 2nd, 1980. Under Title 8 of ANILCA, subsistence preferences were given to local people in parks and monuments. This is especially important because the traditions associated with subsistence gathering can continue in perpetuity and can be taught and practiced by non-native locals as well. So I actually met with President Carter in March of this year to talk about the importance of that legislation and its 40th year and how it's enabled the perpetuation of our subsistence culture and the perpetuation of our traditions. Next slide, please. So I have the very humbling responsibility of managing 3 parks in the national park system. Alaska has a unique opportunity that other regions and parks don't. We do allow people as well as visitors to subsist in our parks. And subsistence is a way of life that continues today in all ANILCA parks established under the same legislation, especially for people who rely on fish, land, and sea mammals, wildlife, and plant resources to supplement their basic needs. Of the 3 parks I manage, subsistence is actually clearly laid out as a priority. Our responsibility to ensure the traditions associated with subsistence gathering are important to the park and parks. Part of that includes monitoring the weather and changes in patterns of migrations of those resources. The little girl in the bottom right actually goes to Mount Edgecombe right now. She's a senior. Next slide, please. So subsistence users have a unique connection to the land fostered by tradition and lifelong experience. Indigenous knowledge is the system of knowledge gained by experience, observation, and analysis of natural events that's shared among family members. Sometimes you'll hear that as citizen science. In subsistence, that knowledge is used to find, harvest, process, store, and sustain natural resources necessary for food, clothing, shelter, and other needs. Subsistence users are taught at a very young age that they do not waste subsistence resources, especially fish and wildlife. They're taught to take only what is needed when it is needed and to treat all living things with respect. They're also taught not to damage the land that sustains them. And subsistence is a living tradition based on a deep respect for that wildlife and for sharing resources with others in their community. Next slide, please. So, Kanurit Basilia, which means how is the weather? Kanurit Basilia is one of the phrases that even 3-year-olds learn. All of the children in the top photo actually know when an elder or an adult says Kanurit Basilia, they look out the window and they look at the weather and the weather patterns. Weather is so important to Inupiaq people that we learn about the weather before we learn to read. So, as you may have heard, we have 9 different words for snow. Wet snow, dry snow, frozen snow, snow that melts before it hits the ground. Our young children know what dark clouds over the horizon means and what the difference between an ocean blizzard and a land blizzard means. Unfortunately, our weather is changing so rapidly that people are dying. Subsistence resources are being lost, and thousands of years of data is being washed away. The Arctic Network, which is an inventory and monitoring network, publishes a weather and climate summary for Arctic parks quarterly. Some highlights include, of the 10 warmest summers on record in Western Arctic National Parklands, 8 have taken place in the last 15 years. Weather anomalies were 8 to 16 degrees warmer than normal. And in March of 2019, Kotzebue hit 41 degrees above zero, the highest temperature ever recorded. Other records are also being broken in March, including the lowest sea ice ever recorded in the Bering Sea and the lowest sea ice in the Kotzebue Sound ever. If you look at this Arctic report card provided by NOAA, you can see some highlights about the sea. Arctic sea ice extent at the end of summer 2019 was tied with 2007 and 2016 as the second lowest since satellite observations began in 1979. The thickness of the sea ice has also decreased, resulting in an ice cover that is more vulnerable to warming air and ocean temperatures. Next slide, please. And why is this important to us? Thick ice is essential for safe travel between our communities. In an area of the world with no connecting roads, winter travel by dog sleds or snow machines happens daily. Both my great uncles were lost when they traveled at a normal time in the spring to our camp, and they fell through the ice with their snow machines and gear. We never did recover their bodies. 2 years ago, my cousin went hunting in places he's gone hunting for 30 years and never returned. And unfortunately, last April, a cousin of mine went through the ice with her husband and 11-year-old niece, and all three perished in a place where the ice should have been thick enough to travel safely. Administratively, overland winter travel is important to the monument, preserve, and park, as the cost to fly is tremendous, but the uncertainty of the thickness of the ice means a higher cost to those of us tasked with managing the land. To ensure the safety of our employees, we have to pay for vendor flights when we once could travel safely by snow machine to all three parks. Traditionally, this means that even though my family has safely hunted bearded seals since it became available, in one single generation that traditional knowledge will be lost. My granddaughter will never be able to safely hunt on the ice pack outside of town. Her father, my son, was 18 the last time he was able to go to the ice pack safely. And in one single generation, 13,000 years of information will be gone. Next slide, please. Our monthly traditional calendar has changed so drastically in just 10 years. A few of those examples are here. In January, we traditionally catch fur-bearing mammals. Trapping in the areas with shrub trees takes place for those animals. Animals are in full winter fur, and they're very thick and perfect for use. Fur-bearing animals start to lose their winter fur earlier due to warming temperatures. The uncertainty in weather patterns deter people from leaving traps out for too long. For sheefish in March and April, people travel from Selawik and Noatak, Buckland and Kotzebue to fish for sheefish through the ice. Nets can be set up as well to catch fish under the ice, and traditionally, the ice at that point in time is 4 to 6 feet thick. Unfortunately, thin ice conditions prohibit people from traveling over the ice now in those months. It also makes it unsafe for fishermen. Sheefish season is shorter, and it's one of our largest whitefish, and the ice has been much thinner in recent years for net fishing under the ice. So in August and September, we traditionally catch caribou here. They often come down the coast in the summer, and they can be hunted by boat. Unfortunately, the caribou herd has both declined, and summer and the migration has changed. Summer caribou is rarely hunted now. Salmon season is usually abundant, both for commercial fishing and subsistence fishing. Arctic char and king salmon are also caught in subsistence and commercial nets. None of this goes to waste. Like Madison said, we do a lot of salmon processing here. And unfortunately, salmon now are showing warmer water parasites now that we've never seen before. And the weather is really warm, which dries the fish quickly on the outside, but the inside doesn't dry well, which is a health hazard. Next slide, please. So it's cut off a little bit, but you can see the little arrow on the very, very bottom is Onion Portage. And then the Kobuk River is, you can barely see the Kobuk River, but the Kobuk River is underneath that arrow and underneath the word Kobuk River. The red dots are caribou that are collared, and this is about a month or two. Oh, I can see it now. It must have been my mouse covering it. The red dots are caribou that are collared, and this is about a month ago. As of October 26th, not a single collared caribou has crossed the Kobuk River. Actually, this is a quote I'm going to read from one of our scientists. Good morning. As of October 26th, still not a single collared caribou has crossed the Kobuk River. By far, it's the latest since we started monitoring. In the early years of the program, the first collar would cross in late August. Right now, there appears to be 3 main segments of the herd, one far north by Wainwright. Oftentimes, animal up there at this time of year will just hang there for the winter. The second and third group are close together, but I suspect they may do different things. The eastern clump is in northeast Noatak National Preserve. In the last couple of years, animals here at this time of year have ended up wintering now in northwest gates of the Arctic. The third clump looks like it might head for the capture team, but it veered off to the west. Next slide, please. So Alaska's abundance, I mean, why is all of that information important to us? It's important because Alaska's abundance of natural resources are the backbone of life and economy of many people. Today, as in the past, many Alaskans still live off of the land, relying on fish, wildlife, and renewable resources. Subsistence is critical to sustaining both the physical and spiritual culture of Alaska Native people. It's important for non-natives as well. So as Arthur Lake states, subsistence defines us. We battle the elements and sometimes risk our life to get the foods we crave. It's not an easy life, but it is ours. I would like to point out that in rural Alaska, Alaska does have a high cost of living, but in rural Alaska, in Kotzebue specifically, it's 1.6 times higher than Anchorage. A gallon of milk is just about $10. Our gas has gone down. It's a little under $6 right now. But subsistence foods is the #1 subsidy for rural Alaskans. Next slide, please. So subsistence gathering from the ocean and land is synonymous with our culture, identity, and self-determination. And we still face challenges daily. We face those challenges like changing weather patterns, diminishing sea ice, coastal erosion, and the uncertainty of migration routes. All Alaskans feel those effects, not just those in rural Alaska. This is where Arctic research comes in. The research goals directly affect our subsistence activities, and it's important for scientists to work with hunters to ensure holistic projects are completed that benefit both the people directly affected as well as the agencies and their missions. Alaskans in the scientific field are what is needed to ensure that our way of life continues. Research from middle school through high school and undergraduate to graduate level projects will help our agency learn and make sound management decisions. It really, really is up to you. Next slide, please. So as a federal land manager and as an Indigenous person who's practiced subsistence my entire life, it's my responsibility to my tribe and the future generations of Americans who want to experience this public land and as well as subsist off the land my own ancestors did. It's important to be proactive about decision making and mitigating effects in our parks in areas such as food security, natural resource management, climate change, policy change, and safeguarding our rich culture and relationship with the land. Only with a healthy and thriving culture, a healthy environment with sustainable resource management can we ensure we have this public land for the next 7 generations. Koyana. That's a little baby Maya again at Cape Cruisenstern, and then my 3 girls fishing.
Thank you so much, Maya. That was an extremely moving and informative presentation. And I think I speak for all of us when I say I'm really sorry for the loss and the struggles that you and your family and community have experienced. This stuff is hard to hear for people, but your stories and stuff is extremely important. So thank you so much for sharing this with us today and sharing your family photos and your children and your way of life. So I really appreciate it. And now we're going to open up to everyone for questions. So if
I haven't looked at the chat log during the presentation, but I see there's some.
Yeah, I didn't see many during. I had someone that was interested if that informative infographic calendar showing climate change and impacts was available online. I think they were really interested in that. So
it is the circular one is actually available from the climate. It's called CAKE, Climate Adaptation Knowledge Exchange, I believe. And it's online. I actually meant to cite it on the bottom, and I think I covered it with one of those quotes. I do actually also have a Silyalanguraktuk, which is our changing weather graphic, or I'm sorry, it's not a graphic. It's a table that shows our subsistence calendar and the information that of the changes that people are seeing in indigenous knowledge holders. Excuse me.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And there's definitely some comments here about thanking you for this valuable information and your perspective. Let's see, we have a question. What are your comments on animal agriculture versus subsistence living?
I'm not in animal agriculture whatsoever. However, there are around 250,000 caribou in the Western Arctic caribou herd, and you know, their migration is 15, 20 million acres wide and or large, I guess. And you know, people are continually talking about organic grass-fed meat, and you can't get any more organic or wild than caribou from the Western Arctic caribou herd. They you know, generally the studies that we have that are published show that they don't have you know, contaminants in them, and so they're completely safe to eat. There may be a couple of newer publications that show a little bit of a rise in some contaminants near Red Dog Mine, but you know, those are published online. I don't have them with me, but generally speaking, you know, the wild Alaska salmon and wild game is, you know, the safest and best bet. The other thing about agriculture is we're not going to be able to have a cattle farm up here. It's too cold. And so the opportunity for us to eat protein, or not just protein, but like red meat, is caribou, moose, muskox. Excuse me. Right now, I was just looking on Facebook, and a pack of 3 New York strips was $82 at the store.
Wow. Crazy. Okay, let's see. We have a question from Alicia. Can you expand on the type of parasites you were seeing up north now?
This type of parasites, I'm sorry.
She said, can you expand on the type of parasites you were seeing up north now?
I think that may be related to the salmon question. Well,
that was, sorry, hi Maya, this is Alicia. I just had heard your comment about you see newer parasites up north now, and I was curious as to, yeah, salmon poisoning was one of them, but I had heard also that sometimes in the beluga up there, you're seeing toxoplasmosis, I believe. Was that correct?
Right. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of beluga anymore. They just don't come through. We may get one family that gets 1 or 2 per summer, and that's quickly divvied out. Beluga are large animals, but feeding your entire family is, it goes really quickly. And so we used to be able to cut the beluga meat. And so bearded seal and beluga is all eaten dried like jerky, and it's dried outside. It's not cooked. And so indigenous knowledge holders and have, unofficially, or I don't know how to explain that, encourage people to make sure that they cook all their beluga first and then dry it. And so it's a different taste and a different texture. However, we still can eat it. So they just have encouraged you to cook it all if you get beluga meat. And then as far as the salmon goes, the conversation that we were having with commercial fishermen was, I'm not a fisheries biologist. We do have the Selwick Fish and Wildlife Refuge that has some of that information, but the commercial salmon fishermen said that they were seeing some of those larger cyst-like worms through their salmon meat. And so the buyers were concerned about that because, they want wild Alaska salmon that doesn't have parasites in it. And they also were seeing, I'd have to open my notebook, but they were also seeing a lot more of the stomach worms that are generally seen like in the Kenai and Seeloff River. If you catch red sockeyes down there, you see a lot of those longer worms in their stomach, which are fine, but we generally don't see a lot of those up here, but we have been seeing a lot for the last 4 or 5 years. This information that I shared was from several conversations that we had with subsistence users. It's gathered from our Subsistence Resource Commission meetings. And I just kind of put it in a January through December table, and I add what I add. And our biologists and our resources people will refer back to the calendar that we keep and have those conversations with the subsistence users to develop projects and to ask them questions when researchers come up with projects that they can do. We do have monitoring of lakes and lagoons and whitefish in Cape Krusenstern, and I'm sure that those biologists could tell you all about them.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. We have a question from Lisa Bush, the director of Sitka Sound Science Center. She's asking, what is one area in science that you think needs to be studied immediately?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would say climate change and the personally, I should say this. Personally, I would say climate change and the effects that it has on subsistence resources, but I'm not sure that you can actually study that. Some of the climate change isn't going away, and so studying the impact that it has is not going to solve a problem. And so maybe trying to think about, something that can be solved, like what are better ways to store subsistence resources in, today in this weather, maybe something like that. Generally, most of my answers are going to revolve around subsistence because it's one of the more important resources that we have up here.
This kind of goes along those lines. Mary is asking, how much has the timing of freeze up and break up changed?
It has changed dramatically. I have a kind of a funny personal story about freeze up and break up in hunting. we eat 100% of our protein that we either catch or grow ourselves. We have chickens and we raise some ducks and call them ourselves. But my husband and I got married October 6th because we spent a couple, I knew that by October 6th we weren't going to be hunting, and it was freeze up, and during freeze up and during breakup we don't generally do anything. It's kind of a resting period. I do a lot of skin sewing during that time, and so I just told him, as long as whatever date works for me, as long as it's not during berry picking or caribou hunting or whatever. And so we got married October 6th in 2006, and within the last 6 or 7 years, we've been on the river. We've been catching our caribou right around October 15. And so we haven't really spent an anniversary together, and we kind of laugh about it because, it's one of those things that we knew in 2006 in perpetuity that we would not be hunting in the, second week in October, and that's just not the case anymore. So, freeze up has definitely changed. We've had both caribou crossing and seals in the sound at Thanksgiving. And when I was growing up, our rule of thumb was you had to wait till after Thanksgiving to get on the ice with your dog team. And then when we got a snow machine, the rule of thumb was you had to wait till Christmas to get on the ice with your snow machine safely. And we had a winter storm a couple of years ago where waves were hitting the park ranger station on New Year's Day.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. I didn't even think about you having like anniversaries, using those as like markers. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right, we have about 3 more minutes. So we have a question from Wendy. Is there any technology that can be used to measure ice thickness to increase safety?
Yes, so there's actually a couple of projects going on right now. I think there's one called Sikungun Ikalvik, which is like we're working on the ice or something like that. So there are other agencies that are doing projects like this. Like I said before, middle school and high school students, we've had really good projects with them, measuring ice thickness during certain times, and then basically, graphing the thickness of the ice during, in November, December, January, February, March. And we actually use some of that information. I personally use it in my management decisions where, I'll call the high school science teacher and ask them if they've done some ice core measurements in, February and March. And if they have, and it's, 4 feet thick or whatever, then I will approve my staff to be on snow machines, into the park and preserve and monument. However, if they, if those high school students are measuring ice and it's, thinner, then we don't allow that, and we have to use an airplane. There is a drone, which we don't use in the Park Service. However, there's a ice drone that the Fish and Wildlife is using. And I do think that drone usage should be used and is a really, really good piece of technology, especially if it has, thermal imaging for drones, has, you can measure the heat index that ice is putting out, which sounds really weird, but it works. And so if you can take that drone and, go 10 or 15 miles and then come back and then measure the ice thickness, then that's going to be, something that I can use as a manager to say, oh, it's perfectly fine all the way over there. But if there's some spots that are a little bit less safe, then say you have to take an airplane, or we say, just avoid those areas. But there's a lot of technology right now that can help agencies like the Park Service or other agencies, make better decisions or be safer, I guess. And that drone information is also really good for subsistence users. We use NOAA's satellite imagery for ice to see where the ice is when we are going to go out for bearded seals. And I actually haven't been on the ice in many, many years. Once my kids were old enough, then they went out with either my uncles or my other family members, and I didn't have to. I just processed it with them when they came back. And so we use that satellite technology all the time between about May through July to see where the ice pack is, and then people can, go out and get ugruk.
I'm so glad you talked about drones and technology. I actually had a question about that because I'm really a big fan of drones and how it's less expensive and safer to get certain information. But I was trying not to be selfish and ask my questions and ask the audience's questions. So I'm really glad that you addressed that. Thank you. All right, let's see, multitasking, right? Let's see. Okay, we have a question. I think we actually have more time. Sorry, I mistake. I think we have until 11:55 until our break. So if you guys still have questions, please pop them in there. But we have someone asking, and I think you might address this a little bit, but what questions do you wish people were asking you that they might not be asking you?
How can we encourage middle school and high school students to go into the science field, especially local people and people who grew up in rural Alaska and get more Alaskans into science and not just science, but anthropology and things like that. I'm not sure if that's a question that people can ask, but I do think that people who grow up in places like Kotzebue and grow up the way that I grew up, they're already scientists. And so how can we maybe, mold that into being on par with Western science?
Yeah.
Or science, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree with you for sure. And I know there's a lot of people, the Science Center and Sitka whalefest, and that have trying to help with that question as well. But yeah, that's a great topic and issue that needs to be addressed for sure. All right, let's see. We have time for one last question. I'm looking through here. We have a question. I'm not sure. Let's see. Any thoughts on returning to dog teams that can sometimes rescue a man who falls through the ice?
My family happens to be one of the only families who still uses a dog team. So I personally don't. I grew up in a dog yard. We had 40 dogs to both for long distance sprint racing and for hunting. And I promised myself as a 13-year-old cleaning dog poop from the yard every single day that I would never have a dog team. So I personally, at 43 years old, am like, maybe we need to go back to that. However, my uncles still both have dog teams. My cousin has a dog team. And my grandfather went through the ice once also, but he only used a dog team. So he, actually he didn't go through the ice. His front leaders went through the ice and they just backed up and went around. They're also much lighter than snow machines. So I am definitely a proponent for dog teams. I just, however, want to, I think people don't understand how hard and how much work they are. We have chickens and they're hard work in the Arctic. We have to twice a day give them water. And yesterday we had no visibility and, blowing 60 miles an hour. I had to go to the chicken coop twice and I have 4.5 feet of snow in front of it. And so I had to dig that out twice. And dogs are the same way. You have to feed them every day. You have to water them every day. And so if you're relying on things like commercial dog food, that's going to be expensive really quickly. So you have to, having a dog team also means you might not be able to have, a full-time job or you may have to have only one person working. It's kind of a balancing act for people. I feel lucky because if I feel like I want to go on a dog sled ride, I call my uncle and I say, hey, did you run the dogs today? And maybe I'll go over there with a snow machine and then take them for a ride and then come home with a snow machine. So there is definitely the opportunity to continually use dog sleds, but it's a balance. We live in a cash economy and it's hard to do that when you have to also work.
Yeah, definitely pros and cons for sure. Yeah. I think that is all of our questions. So I just really want to thank you so much for being here and chatting with us and your presentation. I really wish we were in person so we keep talking story and stuff. Hopefully you'll come to Sitka maybe in the future at some point during whalefest.
I'll be there in May for the graduation.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh, how fun. How exciting. All right. So we have a break coming up now. Maybe if everyone can get like a virtual round of applause for Maya. We have a lot of awesome comments. Thank you, Maya. Great presentation. Thanks for educating us. Thank you so much. So yeah, it seems like it's universal that everyone really enjoyed your presentation. Okay, so we have a break coming up here. So, go to the bathroom, Google that infographic that you wanted to find. I think someone at some point put it in this chat window. Get a snack, whatever you need to do. And there also are going to be a few short videos during the break. And then after the videos, you'll get a screen that'll show you a countdown of how much time you have left to come back for our next guest speaker, Dan Olson.
Visit a place where wilderness still means wild, and where every breath brings new discovery. Leave the tamed world behind you. Open your eyes to another world. Come live in the moment. In Sitka, Alaska. More than you can imagine, closer than you think.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much. People that are still with us from this morning from an amazing presentation from Maya Kadak-Lukin. Thank you again, Maya, for that. Or if you're just joining us this afternoon, really quick, I really want to thank the whalefest audience. You people take your time, your special audience, because you take your time to continue to learn and grow and hear people's stories. And that's what's going to make the world a better place. And so thank you for being here and making whalefest happen. All right, so up next we have Dan Olson for Mom Knows Best, Killer Whale Culture. So Dan first experienced killer whales while teaching sailing for Outward Bound in the San Juan Islands in the late 90s. In 2004, he began recording killer whale calls while working as a tour boat captain in Seward, Alaska. He was extremely intrigued and just very much consumed by the ability to identify pods based alone just on their calls. Dan became involved in the North Gulf Oceanic Society in 2006 and is now the research director after pursuing a master's from the University of Alaska, Fairbanks. For Dan, the most interesting thing about killer whales is their extreme intelligence, that their family relationships can be traced back to the mothers, again, why females are so important, and that there's this ability to identify killer whale families by their calls. We see trends that last for generations, and it's fascinating, he says. I asked Dan what his one thing that his younger self thought he would never be doing in his career. And he said he still remembers the day that he learned it was possible to identify killer whale families by their calls, and it just completely blew his mind. Now, him and his team have hydrophones that listen all winter long. They collect the recordings each spring and then spend time identifying pods that were present during different months. It's a pretty awesome thing to be able to do. A real fun fact about Dan, he is not just a researcher, he's a very funny guy. He has performed improv comedy in Seward, Homer, and Anchorage. So hopefully we get some jokes, or I'm setting you up and then you have to have jokes now because I said it, right? I also asked Dan, like I asked Maya, if he had any advice for the youth out there, and he had some good advice as well. He says, keep learning, keep learning, keep learning. Eventually you will get really good at something or very knowledgeable about something. Eventually people will notice, let your skills and your expertise speak for themselves. Very good advice, Dan, and I will turn it over to you now.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's an honor to be here with all of you, and I'd like to thank Hal and Heidi for their talks yesterday. I'd also like to thank Maya for her talk today. That was absolutely incredible. Really great to watch. There we go. Well, I'd like to talk about killer whales today, in particular, killer whale culture. And for starters, again, my name is Dan Olson. I work with the North Gulf Oceanic Society. I was born and raised near Seattle, but my DNA says my roots are Norway, Ireland, the Isle of Man. So clearly the mountains and the sea are where I belong. I'm not a native Alaskan, but I have been fortunate to be able to live in and experience and call this place home for about 20 years. I'm also fortunate that I get to study an animal that, like the native Alaskans, has been living here for tens of thousands of years, generations after generations of cultural knowledge being passed down. Before we go any further, I really need to introduce you to a mother, because for killer whales, it's all about mothers. It's all about grandmothers as well, which I think Maya would probably agree that cultural knowledge, these grandmothers are highly important to knowledge in these groups. For this mother, Chiniga, 89, I introduced her to you because she was an integral part of getting me hooked into science and hooked into killer whale calls. And I've crossed out transient because it's a little bit of a misleading term. You may have heard of transients, residents, and offshores. But sometimes we have some very local transients. And so we call them Biggs killer whales, or I might refer to them as mammal specialists because their diet is the biggest part of that. Chaniga herself, I was running a tour in 2004 for Kenai Fjords Tours off Thumb Cove. I lowered down my hydrophone, made a recording, and I'm going to play that for you. And I heard this call. It sounded kind of lonely to me. I made a recording and I sent that on over the VHF radio from boat to boat. I sent that to Craig and Eva, who were returning from a research trip. And Eva Salidas, she immediately said, oh, that's one of the AT1 transients trying to get in touch with the rest of its pod. And I was like, yeah, right. There's no way. Sure enough, they came, identified it was the group she thought it was. And I departed and found two more. And within a half an hour, all three were grouped back up together again. That's fairly uncommon for killer whales to have meaning for their calls in that way, tied to a behavior. But for this group, it is. Most calls are just family identifiers, which this one essentially is as well. But in this case, lets us know that they're searching out for each other. Because they're mammal specialists, they have to be quiet, stealthy, and call out. Well, I was hooked. I knew that I had to investigate this more. I went to British Columbia. I spent time with Paul Spong and Helena Simmons on Hansen Island, listening to the residents of British Columbia. I went to the Vancouver Aquarium and harassed Harold York and Lance Barrett Leonard, and they even set me up with an office there. I had not even studied science yet, and I was just charging and trying to learn these calls and call types. The special thing about the AT1 transients, the unfortunate thing about the AT1 transients, they swam right through the oil spill in 1989. And one of those photos has killer whales swimming right by the stern of the Exxon Valdez. And they weren't the only pod to do so. Both the AT1 transients and the AB pod of residents both swam through the oil spill, and their numbers crashed for both those pods. Since then, the AB pod has had calves, but the AT1 transients have not had a calf since the year before the spill. So it's highly unfortunate. And we lost 9 animals in the year and a half right after the spill for these AT1s. They haven't had a calf since, and they're now down to 7. Fortunately, we saw all 7 or got photos from contributors this year. All 7 of them are still alive. But there's an excellent book that Eva wrote, Integrate Silence, and she again is the researcher I mentioned. Her book parallels watching her study animals. She studied the AT1 specifically, watching them dwindle and die off at the same time as she was struggling and battling against cancer, and we lost her in 2015. And so these calls that we heard from the AT1s will eventually be lost from the entire soundscape of sound. As far as cultural transmission is concerned, Hal gave an excellent definition yesterday, so I include that here. Culture is information or behavior acquired by social learning, shared by members of a group. And cultural transmission I have as the process of passing on socially learned information. We're saying the same thing here, but what we're seeing in sperm whales and killer whales and elephants and wolves and all these social animals is that we're seeing information passed on, not instinctively, not genetically, but socially learned behaviors. And that's important because that implies quite a bit about memory ability and the importance of multiple generations. And in this case, the importance of mothers and grandmothers. There's been an excellent outpouring explosion of literature about animal intelligence, animal emotion, Franz de Waal, Carl Safina, Cy Montgomery, amongst others. There's been really great books coming out investigating animal intelligence, emotion, grief, empathy, conflict, politics, particularly among the social animals, chimpanzees, bonobos, elephants, pilot whales, killer whales, sperm whales. And in the scientific literature, that happens as well. We heard from Hal Whitehead yesterday, and he's published a tremendous amount about culture and communication amongst sperm whales. And I learned quite a lot about killer whale calls from Harold Yerk. This is his paper about cultural transmission of calls, family calls from generation to generation. For killer whales specifically, what I want to talk about today is how we see specific diets between ecotypes, which we believe is this cultural divergence. And there's been several papers written about genetics changing as a result of cultural influence. And we see rubbing beaches that the same pods use over and over again. We see this fishing, hunting spots that are specific to specific pods, specific families. And we see it in the acoustics. I'm going to talk about all these things a bit. Now, these names, residents, transients, offshores, I mentioned they kind of fit, but they kind of don't. Transients tend to have larger ranges than residents, but that's not always true. And really what should be focused on is that residents are salmon specialists, transients or bigs are mammal specialists, and offshores are shark specialists. And I'm sure you've heard about these types here in the North Pacific, but you may not have heard about some of the others in the world. And you may not have heard too much about offshores as shark specialists, and not all the good data is published yet, but offshores, about 93% of their diet is shark. They will eat some other fishes, but shark, the majority. This photo has a salmon shark, about a 10-foot salmon shark. I took this picture a couple years ago near Seward, 10-foot salmon shark in the mouth of a killer whale. And the photo below it is the liver of a sleeper shark that was probably also about 12 feet in length. Incredible diet differences that they are remarkably tied to. In 40 years of study, we have not seen exceptions to these. We have not seen mammal specialists eating fish or salmon specialists eating mammals, and we know less about the offshores, but 93% of their diet has been shark so far. Of course, that doesn't speak about killer whales in the entire world. Resident, the term resident only applies to the North Pacific, from Japan, Kamchatka, Russia, Alaska, British Columbia, Washington. And that's the same for transients and offshores. You go elsewhere in the world, they are different types. In your chat box, go ahead and I'd like you to go ahead and throw in your chat box a location in the world that you've seen killer whales or orca, either a country or a region. And as you do that, I'll explain these. The Northern Hemisphere animals are all on the left panel and the Southern Hemisphere on the right. And we see the residents up top, the biggest killer whales underneath. We see offshore killer whales, the third one down, and then type 1 and type 2 from the North Atlantic. And then on the right-hand panel, we see the Antarctic types, Antarctic type A, type B, type C, and type D at the bottom. What's interesting about these, there's a lot of talk about whether they should be separate species or not. And I had long conversations with some of the leading genetic researchers. And of course, if these were birds, they would have been split already. Birders are known for splitting species, but the leading geneticists for killer whales aren't quite ready to split them, but the people who want to name them are very ready to split them. So what we see though, and I noticed that you have a lot from Alaska, of course, Alaska and Juneau and Salish Sea down in Washington, Metlakatla, Chile, and I've seen them in Antarctica, Norway, and Greenland. Some people here from Argentina, California, and Antarctica. Those different types have different diets. And in fact, when I go on to this next slide, you'll see that the smaller forms of these killer whales in each region are the fish eaters. So in Antarctica here, on the right side down low, those are type C killer whales. They've only been seen eating fish. Whereas The largest up on top has been eating large whales and large seals like elephant seals, small whales like minke whales. I said large whales, but the larger cetaceans. Type Bs are interesting. The top form is a Gerlache whale eating seals off the ice. You need to look for those videos online. Also, there's a smaller type B version that's only been seen eating penguins. And so what's interesting is this diet divergence has happened in 3 different places, and the fish eaters are not related to each other. The mammal eaters are not related to each other. They're all distinct types, and that diet divergence has happened separately in the Atlantic, the Pacific, and in the Antarctic. So that's incredibly, incredibly fascinating. One thing that we see as an evidence of culture for our killer whales, our residents, our salmon specialists up in Alaska, is their diet and their feeding holes. And they definitely spend time fishing with their mothers, with their pod. They know where to go, how to go, when to hunt, and what time of year. And I want to tell you a quick little story about 2 salmon specialists. We have Stellar and Lou. These are both part of the AK pod. The AK pod split in the mid-90s. And Stellar, she's 20 years old. She has 3 living offspring, but she had help from her grandmother on her first 1 or 2. Lou, not her grandmother, Stellar had help from her mother, which is a grandmother to the offspring. Sorry about that. Lou, at 19 now, she lost a calf in 2015. She lost another calf in 2018. The difference is Lou had lost her mother. She didn't have the support that the other group had. In fact, a very interesting thing is that Lou, after her mom died, she swam with her brother kind of near her sister a while, and she's one of the rare cases of bouncing between pods. Lou actually went and swam with her cousin Stellar, but she didn't have the support of her mom. She had less of a link with her aunts and her cousins, and she's lost 2 calves. We're hoping to see one next year, the year after. We're hoping it survives. But the point here is that having a grandmother present in the pod is actually part of their survival. There's a published scientific paper that shows survival rates being higher while the grandmother is still alive. One thing we do is collect salmon scales out in the fjords, and it's really cool. We can not only see the species of salmon when we collect a scale. We can also know the age of the salmon, the sex of the salmon, and the river of origin, at least definitely the region of origin, which is really fascinating. In the top panel here, you see El Dorado with that big male dorsal fin. It's easy to think that he's the leader of the pack. He is not. He is a giant mama's boy. He will swim with his mother his entire life, and the only time that he will mate with anyone else when multiple pods get together. And at the end of the day, he is on his way back down to swim with his mother. Never knows his offspring, swims with his mom. He's in his mom's house his entire life. When we see an animal like that turning and diving at the same time, we know that they're chasing a fish. And in the lower panel, you can see a salmon in that frame. We go in with the tour boat, research boat, the Natoa, looking for salmon scales, collect them up, send them to Canada, Department of Fisheries, Oceans, Nanaimo, and they tell us lots of good stuff as soon as they open up their lab from COVID. The other interesting thing I'm finding in salmon scales, they're highly specific species to location. In this map I printed out, I colored all the Chinook salmon in purple and all the chum salmon in orange, all the silver salmon in silver, and the sockeye in red. There's not much of it. But you notice the Chinook salmon are highly specific to certain locations. Not only that, but it's only in a narrow window of time, May 15 to June 15th, that we're collecting most of those Chinook scales in that region. whereas later in the summer, we collect Chinook scales in other areas. What we see is the same pods going to the same spots in this same time of year, same months. And we saw that with satellite tagging too. I published a paper in 2018 that looked at the core use areas for different pods. And you can see in the upper left, Hinchinbrook entrance was heavily used by the ABAIAJ pod, more than other pods used it. And we see that in the field also when we make observations. Over by Kayak Island, they're the only pods to go out there. And not only that, but just about every tag we put on an AB, AI, or AJ pod member went out to that area. We do not. It can get very rough and hard to work out there, but the tags have shown that to be an important spot, but just for those pods only. We don't tag anymore. It's very invasive, but it did tell us a few things. Really, that these different groups of pods, which we actually do call clans, we just don't, they're defined a little bit different than how clans are defined for sperm whales, as we heard from Hal the other day. But we see the same thing where different clans, different groups of pods are using different areas for foraging. We also collect scat, fecal matter, poop, out in the field, which is really exciting. That I never imagined that would be one of the most professional things I'd be doing in my life. But we collect scat and we're able to find a lot of interesting stuff. And this is really cool. Here we have, I had one day where we collected a lot of scat from just the AD8 pod and alpha delta 8, AD8. And the mother and calf, I managed, this mother Capra, AD31, managed to get scat on the same day from her and her calf. And look at that. They both had chum, they both had halibut, they both had Chinook in roughly the same percentages, indicating that the mom was sharing fish with the calf. And that's been published as well. Brianna Wright has an excellent paper about kin sharing, mothers with offspring, grandmothers with offspring, siblings with each other. Interestingly, she found the males don't share very much, which may not come as too much of a surprise to some folks. We have, although in fairness to the males, I will say that often killer whale males swim off to the side and forage separately from the group, presumably because they're larger, they can probably dive deeper while the mothers and calves are swimming and hunting in shallower water. So they're at least not raiding the pantry, so to speak. But check this out. That same day, May 29th, 3 males in the same pod on the same day were mostly all chum, a little bit of Chinook and halibut, but not the same composition as the mother and calf. So this was just a fun instance where we're able to see the mother and calf sharing the same food, the pod generally having a similar diet. And of course, we do see that for all the salmon specialists in our area, the residents, we see chum and Chinook, both very important. You'll have to wait a couple years to see the relative importance of the chum and Chinook from us. And coho salmon, we know, is very important. And a little bit of halibut and flounder are coming out in that in the diet studies there. I'm going to move on to beach rubbing as a cultural event. Now, this is really interesting. In British Columbia, there's lots of beach rubbing at Robson Bight and other places. And here in Kenai Fjords, we have specific beaches that the same pods will use over and over again. I'm going to play a beach rubbing event for you. Listen for what sounds like a 6 or 8 ton animal hitting a gravel beach. And an AK call. Pretty cool. We think it's just a spa run, exfoliate a little bit, but it could be a social event, an important cultural event, religious like tradition kind of thing. We're not quite sure, but the same pods use the same beaches, and not all pods appear to do it, but certainly it happens in Alaska and in British Columbia. So we're interested to know more about it. This, I think, is really cool. There was an artist named Rockwell Kent who spent a winter in Fox Island near Seward, 1918 to 1919. And he made paintings with killer whales quite close to the beach. And in his journals, he also had written that killer whales came in super shallow to the point he thought they couldn't swim, which clearly would have been beach rubbing. For a fish specialist, there's no reason to get that shallow. So we do, I just think it's really cool that this was observed 100 years ago. And for the natives who were living along the coast, I'm sure this was happening 1,000 years ago and 10,000 years ago, one of these cultural traditions that's been a part of their lives for tens of thousands of years, many generations. And now I'd like to get into the acoustics a little bit. Great talk yesterday by Heidi talking about echolocations, whistles, and pulse calls by dolphins. And of course, the killer whale, the orca, is a very large dolphin. They're in the dolphin family. They're still a whale. We can chat about that later. But they also have echolocation, whistles, and pulsed calls. This is different from some other species, like a blue whale or fin whale or humpback whale often uses calls for mating or finding mates. And in the case of the sperm whale that Hal told us about, the echolocation codas indicate the clan. For killer whales, the pulsed calls are family specific. It's like they're shouting their last name, like they're running around shouting their last name to everybody. And it's pretty cool when you hear these calls that are just shouting their last name, letting everyone know where they're at. And some of them are quite alien-like. Now, a study I did on social behavior a couple of years ago put out a paper that just got published this year on social behavior. And I want to talk about the sexy foreign accent. These calls that you're hearing, some of these pods will hear those calls every day because they're in that pod. Some they hear once a week because they run into their cousins. Some they hear every month or two because it's another pod that they mate with, but they don't see very often. And then occasionally some pod will come in from far away that they haven't seen in years. And genetic studies from interbreeding suggest that killer whales mate with those with a sexy foreign accent. My study wasn't really about reproduction because it's difficult to study that. It was more about social behavior. So I looked at social behavior, and what was interesting, social behavior was higher when a rarely sighted pod was present. And that didn't matter if there were 2 pods, 3 pods, or 6 pods. And the findings were significant statistically overall that the having a rarely sighted pod present increased social behavior. And that was independent of the number of pods present, which was really, really cool. Now, I'd like you to jump into the chat and tell me the name of the species on the planet with the largest brain. Is it me? Is it a Brontosaurus or Tyrannosaurus rex? Is it a blue whale because that's the biggest fish? Which is I'm seeing a lot of sperm whale. Excellent, you guys were at Hal's talk. The largest brain is the sperm whale. And of course, largest doesn't mean necessarily the most intelligent. There's lots of ways to do that with neurons, with complexity. And I'd like to talk about complexity. Look at that dolphin brain. I believe this is a bottlenose dolphin brain. Pilot whale brains, killer whale brains, sperm whale brains are all very twisty, curvy. There's a lot of cortical folding or hairification, and much more so than humans. Doesn't necessarily mean they're smarter, but it could. What that means is they have a much higher percentage of gray matter in the brain. And we have something like 20 billion neocortical neurons, and pilot whales have 37 billion, killer whales have 43 billion. We won't go much deeper, but there's theories about why they have such large, complex brains. And it could be because they're social animals, or it could be because they echolocate. And you heard a bit about echolocation yesterday. Here's some killer whale echolocation. And making those clicks out through the melon and back in, receiving it into the lower jaw. Somebody asked yesterday if there was baby talk amongst dolphins and killer whales, and I have to play this for you. You're gonna hear a mom calling and a calf imitating. This is the family specific call. The calf is learning the family specific call. And if that's not the cutest thing in the world, I don't know what is. These calves will imitate the calls, and so the whole family is making the same set of calls, 3, 4, 5 calls, sometimes up to 12, 15 calls, but usually the same 2 or 3 calls most of the time, and it belongs to the family. They're shouting their last name. But one day in 2011, I came across a mother. I came across the pod, the 88 pod, and the mother was missing for about 3 hours. And because these calls are short in duration and high-pitched, kind of squeaky, I believe it's a juvenile, and I believe it's the same animal making each of the calls. And feel free to chat in there what you think this juvenile is shouting while its mother is missing. I've never heard such fast repetition in calls and such high squeaky versions of those calls. It was an absolutely incredible day. And lastly, I want to show you one more type of call because this is fascinating. If you want to dig into acoustics, research biphonic calls. They have a whistle and a pulse call in the same call. And yesterday, Heidi mentioned that you can have echolocation and a call at the same time. For killer whales, we see a whistle and a call at the same time. It's a part of the call. And here's an example. Listen for the whistle. And this time, listen for the lower frequency bit. And you can see in the diagram, there's a high whistle and a lower part. What's fascinating about this is that the high frequency part only goes out forward and the low frequency part goes all the way around. So if you're listening and you only hear the lower frequency part, you know that mom is facing away from you. Not to mention those two signals lose energy at different rates. So they would know how far away mom is, how fast she's moving, if she's aimed at you or away from you. There's so much information they already know that they don't need language in the same way we know it. From echolocation, they would know if their siblings have a cracked rib, or if they have a tumor, or if their sister's pregnant. There's so much they already know without language as we see it. It's quite different. So in summary, cultural transmission we see in killer whales. We have different diets by different ecotypes. We have rubbing beaches that families use, specifically hunting spots, fishing spots, and we see that in the acoustics for sure. So I'd like to thank you for joining me. You can find our program at Whales Alaska on social media. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan, for such a fascinating presentation. For many reasons, I am always a big fan of species that put a high value on females. Maybe humans could learn a few lessons there. All right, so we have a lot of questions that have already piled up, but if you have any questions, please put it in the chat bar down there, and I'll start with the ones that we've already have. All right. Kathy Hart said that she has amazing pictures of AT-10. Is AT-10 still alive?
Yes, AT-10 is still alive. I saw AT-10 last year, and I received photographs from somebody else from AT-10 this year. Yep. And somebody mentioned the mother did come back in that one recording. Go ahead, Maddie.
All right. Has the behavior and health of remaining whales changed since the Exxon Valdez oil spill?
How did the behavior change since the oil spill? That's a really interesting question. You know, the AT1 mammal specialists really focus on glaciers, harbor seals, and things. And boy, it'd be tough to say how their behaviors change. There's certainly fewer of them, and they encounter each other less frequently. So perhaps less social, but that's just a guess. And what'll be interesting to see is if another group of transients end up filling in that niche where they've been using near the glaciers, getting seals on ice. I don't really know. That'd be a fun topic to investigate further.
Okay. Laura is asking, is the AT pod on the verge of extinction?
The AT1 pod is on the verge of extinction. And unfortunately, genetically speaking, we're talking extinction as well because they have a unique genetic haplotype. So it's not just like losing a family, it's losing a whole population that's genetically distinct from other populations. So we're losing those calls, we're losing their niche, and it's a bit sad. We're losing biodiversity essentially by losing that pod. Yeah.
Kind of on the same line of thought, Carrie is asking death. Sorry, could you hear me?
Oh, I didn't hear that last one.
Oh, okay. Someone was asking, what is the main cause in calf death?
In calf mortality, that's an excellent question. Usually, if a mother doesn't have enough nutrition to provide milk, she won't have the calf in the first place. It's probably nutrition related. We don't see attacks from other animals on calves of killer whales. It is possible because residents chase transients away when they see them, but nobody's really observed that kind of attacks. So it's probably just nutrition and having enough salmon. And as we mentioned, having a knowledgeable mother and grandmother around, that multi-generational learning is shown to statistically be important for survival of calves.
So being a mama boy is a good thing, huh? If you're a killer whale.
Yeah. Grandmothers will keep feeding their adult male sons. It happens.
All right. Mike Castellini, part of the whalefest team, he's asking, any evidence that the mammal eaters share their food also?
Yes, there is evidence that mammal eating types, mammal specialists share their food. We see that in False Pass. Craig did a lot of studies looking at feeding on gray whale carcasses. There was one instance of getting one group bullying another group off that carcass. We do see, just this summer, a month ago, I saw some transients, some bigs, killer whales, one holding onto a piece of prey and another tearing, and seeing the blood come from that. So we do see sharing from the mammal specialists, yes.
Interesting. Yeah, watching killer whales take down their prey is a pretty intense experience. I've seen them go after a humpback, and the thing I didn't realize until I actually witnessed it is that, it's not just one animal going after you, it's the entire family, right? The mom, the dad, teaching the kids, it's a whole family that's attacking this animal. So it's really, really interesting. All right. Heidi Pearson just wanted to let you know that they have also seen beach rubbing on the South Island of New Zealand.
Yeah, Heidi, I'd love to talk with you later about that, find out a little bit more about it or dig into it, because one potential reason is I do know that in New Zealand, they chase skates and rays up onto the beaches as a hunting technique. And so whether that's the same purpose or not, in Argentina, they'll run up on the beach to get sea lions. New Zealand, they'll run up on the beach to get skates and rays. So they could do the same purpose, but it also could be for chasing prey.
Okay, let's see. If you can have any question answered about killer whales, what study would it be?
Oh boy. What do they think of us running around in our boats trying to photograph them and name them and why we are so fascinated by them? They must just shake their heads and think these guys are crazy. I am interested in when groups split. Why do they split? Is it just a magic number for any given group, or do two grandmothers who are sisters to each other get tired of each other and move on? We do see pod splits. I'd love to know why that happens and how their calls diverge. We know their calls diverge, but if that's a conscious thing or a natural drift.
All right, Simon Hook is asking, are biphonic calls used as commands during a hunt so that they know who is calling and what to do?
That's a good question. I don't think the biphonic calls act as commands, that they have meaning in that way, but Olga Filatova in Russia has been studying monophonic versus biphonic calls, and she is finding that there's a higher occurrence of one of those types when there's just one pod. There's a lot of work yet to be done on monophonic versus biphonic calls, but Olga Filatova has done a lot of great work recently on it, and we're interested to start looking at it a little bit more closely ourselves. Initially, it's just thought that the purpose is to have a larger repertoire that can't be confused with another pod. If the purpose is pod unity and knowing who your pod is, if one of your calls is similar to another pod, then you have a totally different call type that's a little more distinguishable. That's one thought, but there could be some laced meaning that we just haven't figured out yet.
You have a lot of praise in here. Everyone's very excited about your talk. Powerful talk today, Heidi Harley said, and both so family oriented. So thank you so much. Let's see. It is apparent that in each family group, the gender ratio is skewed. More females than males. Any guesses as to why?
Well, part of what we see there is if you just scan a catalog, you're seeing males, adult females, and juveniles, in which the juveniles, you can't tell if they're a male or a female. So in a given pod, you might be seeing quite a few male juveniles and male calves. Also, there is the fact that males only live 40 to 50 years and females live 60 to 80 years. So that could be a portion of it, that female multi-generational learning is a part of their survival. Whereas males, once their mom dies, they have no good reason to live. And so who knows? But there's it may not be as skewed as it appears, but that would be worth looking into. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we are out of time, but we have one local question that I really want to throw in there. Pat Kehoe asked, I have never seen as many killer whales in the Sitka area as I have the last year or so. Any thoughts on what groups are around there and whether the population is increasing?
Yeah, there's if you're seeing small groups, 3, 4, 5 animals, they're probably mammal specialists, big killer whales. If you're seeing large groups of like 6, 8, 10, 12, 20 animals, it's probably the salmon specialists. And whether it's one or the other is important to get at your question, but many things can happen. Prey distribution, like sometimes there's a hot spot for a while that's good for prey. Maybe there's a lot of herring that Chinook salmon are eating and the killer whales are there for the Chinook salmon. And maybe that shifts to a different location in any given year. After the blob and the marine heat wave in recent winters has really thrown a lot of systems out of whack for prey fish and predators and things. And we see some changes with our killer whales, but certainly for fish and prey species, there's a lot of changes that adjust to temperature and prey base.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for your amazing questions. Thank you, Dan, for your presentation and taking the time to tell us your story and what you've been learning with killer whales. So with that, that is our last talk for the day. I want everyone to give Maya and Dan another virtual round of applause for such wonderful presentations today. Couldn't do this without you guys. A lot of great responses in the chat, silent applauses going on. So thank you guys so much. And yeah, this is a very different experience for the audience, Sitka whalefest being virtual, but also it's very different for the speakers. So putting a lot of work. So thank you to the speakers and the audience. And again, Sitka whalefest, you're such a great audience. You're willing to learn and share things that you know with these speakers we have, and it's such a great festival we have here. I have a few notes for everyone. Again, we still have one more day of the festival. So if you want to learn more about Ocean Connections, please come back at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, same spot. Don't forget to visit the online marketplace. You can reach it through the website, or there is a link in the chat right now. As well as we have the Maritime Grind tonight. So it's at 6 p.m. and you do not have to register for whalefest. Bring friends, anyone can go. It's actually not, it's not on Zoom, it's on through the website on a different platform. And the grind link is in the chat right now. So you can grab that if you need to. And again, you don't have to register for whalefest. Anyone can come, bring your friends. It's gonna be a great event, and it's brought to us by the Greater Sitka Art Council. So thank you so much to them. A last few notes I have. If you're watching with more than one person, please let us know in the chat, because we're really interested to know how many people we're reaching, how many people are interested in this festival. So let us know the number of people if you have more than one per screen. And last, if you're students, stay on, do not log off. Our tech team will put you where you need to be. And so with that, thank you everyone again so much. I love Sitka whalefest. This is a great audience, and we'll see you tomorrow.